pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I roll call, please?
Mrs. Green? Mr. Brennan?
Here.
Mr. Segler?
Here.
Mr. Francis?
Here.
Mr. Hippo?
Here.
Mr. Hoover?
Here.
Mrs. Irwin-Adams?
She'll be here. She's running.
Mr. Johnston?
Here.
Mr. Creed?
Here.
Okay, announcement of executive session. We had an executive session for the purpose of personnel this past Monday. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Freebell with special presentations.
This evening we have 3 presentations. I'd like to just get started with Mr. Hatch.
Sure.
Ms. Campbell.
Mrs. Kimmel, I want to take a few minutes to review and summarize recent, and if it's not been released yet publicly, I know it's on the Future Ready Index site. But as part of Pennsylvania's Every Student Succeeds Act, our Pennsylvania School Improvement Plan, a component of that is identifying schools based on a number of criteria that are in designation of additional targeted support and improvement designation. We had 2 secondary schools, our high school and junior high school, that were designated under this designation. I want to talk a little bit about that identification process, what that means for us, and what we have been doing and will continue to do moving forward to address the concerns that have been outlined. So the data was collaborative from 16-17 and 17-18. So they took 2 years of data, and if you had a subgroup, and a subgroup would be identified as your free and reduced lunch population, special education population, if you have an ethnicity group that has an end count of 20. So if you have at least 20 students that fit that subgroup area, that subgroup is then analyzed and evaluated against the norm and the standard expectations for achievement in 4 other areas. To be identified, a subgroup did not meet the state cut score for academic achievement in math and ELA combined during that 2-year period, or growth for math and ELA combined for that 2-year period. Now, that will be based on our PSSA scores and our Keystone scores at the junior high school and the high school. If the subgroup also did not meet the state cut score in any one of 4 areas, then those 4 areas are graduation rate, English language proficiency, regular attendance, and regular attendance is defined as a student must attend 90% or more of all school days. That's excused days, unexcused days, school trip days, every day absent. They have to have attended 90% of those days as long as they were enrolled for 60 or more days. Or career standards benchmark, which is under Act 339, which is new from last year and really was not applicable to either of our schools. Then the school was given this designation of ATSI. So what does that mean? Our 2 schools that were identified were the high school and the junior high school. For the high school, our students with special needs, our students with disabilities, were identified for not meeting the achievement cut, the growth cut. Our graduation rate was literally 0.63% below the threshold, and our regular attendance rate for students in that subgroup was 8.24% below the cut. So because of those 2 areas, in addition to the achievement and growth standards, that kicked us into the ATSI designation for the high school. For the junior high school, this identified 2 subgroups of students, students with disabilities and black students. And those designations were based on achievement, growth, and regular attendance. For our black student population, they were 1.93% below the cut. For our students with disabilities, they were 0.78 below that threshold. So very close to not even having this designation. However, we were below the cut, and we have to have an improvement plan to address those particular subgroups in those particular areas. If you look at this graphic, this kind of indicates what those 6 criteria are and what our score percentages were. You can see the high school students with disabilities, junior high school students that fit into the black category, and junior high school students with disabilities, and what those scores were. Graduation rate was not applicable to the junior high school. Our EL proficiency, we did not have an end count of 20, So that was not applicable for any of our buildings. In our career standards benchmark, we all met the threshold in that area. So if you look, although our numbers are pretty good and our overall numbers are good, within those subgroups, because being a larger district, we're going to meet most of those subgroup end counts. We're going to be qualifying under most of those as the state looks at our scores. So our next steps, we attended a state mandated training in November for information and training. I'll tell you, it was a little bit of a frustrating meeting in that they were not even able to tell us at the time why we had the designation that we did. We speculated, and to be honest with you, we were wrong in terms of why we thought we would have the designation of the ATSI. Parent notifications were sent last week. If you look, I gave you all a copy of the letter. It's a front back of the letter that was sent to the high school, every student's family in the high school, and every student's family in the junior high school, making them aware of what our status was and what our plan was for addressing those issues. PD's also.
Did that letter go to every student?
We sent it to every family, not just the subgroup. We sent it to everyone. We felt that transparency what was the most important thing at this point, and we wanted to make everyone aware of the targeted efforts for improvement that we already have in place and plan on doing as we move forward. PD used to provide districts and schools with an improvement plan template in December. Literally before we just started the meeting tonight, I got an email indicating that template would not be sent until mid to late January. So already they're behind in terms of getting us the support and what they're going to be mandating for us to provide. One of the things that was very evident, and it was a question of many districts and schools, is that will there be any type of support from the state? What is the support from the state? It is not financial in any way, shape, or form. What it will be is basically assigning folks from the IU to work with us on an improvement plan. Now because it's secondary schools, we're not Title I designation. So since neither of our schools are Title I designation, our approval process will be from the superintendent and from the school board. It will not go through the IU for final approval prior to submission to the state. The due date for that is June 30th. We plan on having a plan to submit to you in May for board approval after Dr. Predatel's review. The plan will be implemented and monitored. It's a 4-year cycle. It's a 4-year period. So they'll be monitoring us over the next 4 years. Specific to those two subgroups are our students with disabilities and our black students at the junior high school to make sure that we are making adequate steps towards addressing the concerns that are outlined with the scores. So interventions, and I know this is a little difficult to read, so I want to touch base. Actually, Sherry, you want to talk about the interventions? Go ahead.
Absolutely. Okay, with regards to the interventions that we are providing now, we're working collaboratively, the junior high supervisor, Jennifer Crum, all the assistant principals, and Lori at the junior high, and at the high school, Andy, Gail Vertangeli, and the principals there. And looking at interventions, first of all, we are providing academic supports and interventions. It's something new to the junior high that we're implementing this year, which it is going very well with regards to that. So there is a carryover, so we're working on being seamless in our curriculum and moving forward to secondary, which will definitely be a good step for us in moving into this plan. We have a dedicated social worker, and she was a blessing, and I thank the board for that, because over this year at the junior high school, she has done some great things with our students. We're actually writing her in as a service to some of our students that have IEPs, which we're getting access reimbursement for that. She can also help with students that are having truancy issues. We have a dedicated social worker now to Andy's high school, which Patty Saka is there working on preventing dropout. And we know that that starts in kindergarten, preventing our dropouts with our students, that's for sure. I mean, we have to start when they are young and moving through. Also at the junior high and the high school, we have clinical homes. Blair Family Solutions, they have school-based mental health within the schools. And they have a maximum of 50 students within each building. And I will tell you, we fill those slots up quite readily. And when students need that, when somebody is exited, somebody goes right into there. That has been very beneficial. These individuals go into the homes, meet with the families. They have group counseling within the school, individual, And this has been a good connection for the families. This has helped a lot of families within the district, especially with helping students maintain attendance. The transition planning for students identified at risk for graduation and attendance concerns. I know at the high school, we're actually starting at the junior high now. We've done some good things in having transition meetings for students, moving from the junior high to the high school, and then the high school, and doing some creative things to get them to graduate. Also at the high school, there's a lot of collaboration within our department, developing pathways to graduation. And I know our work experience program has done a lot with those interventions and helping maintain students get credits for work experience. Just the collaboration with student attendance improvement plans. And that's something that has been a requirement as of, I think, about, 3 years ago. Once they get 6 unexcused absences, we're holding student attendance improvement plans in conjunction with IEPT meetings. And at that time, we're making decisions for students collaboratively with their families being stakeholders. In looking at, is this an appropriate program? And we're looking to reevaluate students. We're doing that at the high school and the junior high. We do it at the elementary level. We're being proactive in that aspect. So, and that's something, maintaining attendance is key in us increasing our scores and making improvements within this. I know the truancy elimination and looking at that working, we work closely with the county with regards to maintaining our attendance, which will help. It's indicative of increasing our graduation rate and our dropout rate.
Just with the turnover of magistrates too, I think that provided us with an opportunity to really kind of shift what our philosophy was in working with the magistrates in terms of, is it a punitive measure, or is it something that's we're trying to get ahead of things and working with families and students to provide services and support at an earlier age when they've been identified as having those attendance issues. What can we put in place that has some teeth behind it at the magistrate level that families are required to follow through with in lieu of fines and other consequences that may happen? We've had sit-downs with Ben Jones, who handles most of our cases, along with the 2 representatives that we send as a district to those meetings to work with the judge and the magistrates on providing services and directives to those families and students. So we feel like we have a lot of positive things going on in the way of attendance. We're doing the home visits when kids aren't coming to school. Principals, Sherry, special ed supervisors, they're on the phone, and if they can't get somebody on the phone, they're at their door knocking on the door. So we're doing proactive, hands-on approach to getting kids early to make sure that they are staying in school. And as Sherry said, attendance is the key. Attendance is really indicative of academic performance and pathway to graduation. So, as I know Ron's talked about a couple of times, with what are the variety of pathways to graduation that we can have for our students, especially our students with disabilities, because we want to have them be maybe not college and career ready, we want to have them society ready. Right. What can we have in place for our students in the way of work experience so that when they exit the high school, whether that be at 18, 19, 20, or 21, that they have a plan for after that. We have services in place, we have supports in place that can help provide them with what they need to be successful as an adult.
Do you have any feedback on what's causing the attendance issues for those groups?
I think from the last couple of years when Patty's been directly involved, a lot of it's connectedness. We've talked about engagement with students and seeing kind of the light at the end of the tunnel and seeing the purpose of education. What can education provide me with in terms of opportunities in the future? And I think it starts with engaging instruction. At the classroom level, we have to get kids earlier. The biggest thing that we found is that truancy is really a habit that begins in elementary school, late elementary school. And if we can identify it early enough and curb it then, it becomes really exasperated when they get to junior high school. Typically that transitional year, 7th grade, that's when you see the real issues starting to begin, where kids are not missing 8-10 days, they're missing 20, 25, 30, 35 days. They get into a pattern of retention, then they're starting to get older within their grade level. They get to 9th grade and maybe they're not successful in 9th grade, and now they're credit deficient. And then once they're credit deficient, they do not see how can I get to the end. They don't see the finish line. So we started academically to put in things with credit recovery, and have some creative solutions with kids in terms of scheduling. How can we give them a hybrid approach where we can give them the things that they need so that by the time they're juniors and seniors, they can have a work experience opportunity, or they can have, another apprenticeship opportunity or something where we're setting them up for what's after graduation. Something to add up
Well,
here?
we also, when we started this conversation, the first thing we did was brought Eric Palmer over.
Yeah.
And Mike Sylvanus from the CTC to talk about, ninth graders and how we get kids into the VOTEC to make sure that we can find a way to intervene with these children. And the other thing is to look at the middle school, look at the junior high, look at the interventions. First of all, try to prevent them from getting behind, one thing. Second of all, make sure they get the assistance they need. And then third, giving them a direction and a pathway to graduation that we know they can be successful with. Because when they get frustrated and they get behind, it all starts to snowball. So we're working on getting in front of it from an intervention standpoint in kindergarten. But we're also adding those interventions into the middle school and then working on transition. It's that 339 transition plan, how we prepare kids for careers. How can we leverage the CTC opportunities for these kids, specifically give them a stronger pathway to success?
One of the things we talked about was an exploratory year. Right now, the kids have to basically bid into a program, and chances are in ninth grade they're not getting the program that they want. So they could possibly still go. However, it might be in a program that they're really not interested in. They don't experience success at that grade level, and then things kind of tend to fall apart from there. So we talked about working with the CTC on developing a marking period-based exploratory year, where they get a flavor of all the different types and options at the CTC. So that way, when they go into 10th grade and they're looking at their 3-year program, they will have a definitive idea of where they want to be and possibly what they want to do when they graduate from school. So that we're not wasting a year, so to speak, in a program that we may not have an interest in or really be successful in. So that's something we're developing, and we're also looking to expand the number of students that we're sending to CTC as 9th graders. They're open to the at-risk student, which is very important because we've done a pretty decent job of identifying who those kids are. Now it's putting the supports in place that can help them be successful at a young age. Because if they get to 10, 11 and they're credit deficient and they're struggling, they're going to be really tough to hold on to. So we got to get them early enough to where we get them engaged and interested to see the value of education and what it can provide for them in the way of their future. So our improvement plan, that development will begin in January of 19. Our team will consist of administration, teachers, counselors, agency stakeholders, because we have a lot of kids, especially our students with disabilities, that are working with outside agencies. So having those stakeholders be a part of the process. Parents, obviously, we would love to have a board member be a part of that team as well, to provide input and support, as well as IUA personnel, and most importantly, feedback from students. We're going to be surveying not only our parents, but our students to find out what they need and what their needs are from their perspective, so that can be incorporated into the plan that will be specifically targeting students with disabilities, attendance and graduation rate, and students that are Black or students with disabilities on attendance rates at the junior high school. So that's where we're at. There were 289 schools designated as ATSI. That is the second of the 2 designations. If you were comprehensive, if you're identified as comprehensive, there's much more to that in improvement process at the state level. Unfortunately, we are not in that status, but we do have a couple of areas that we need to identify and we need to work on. That's the plan.
Real quick.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned the 9th grade into the VOTEC.
Yes.
Is 8th grade to get them, is 8th grade too early to get those kids?
Well, the way the program works, it's a 3-year program. So we started sending 9th graders, and some other districts do, but we primarily have done that. We used to send 50 from Keith and Roosevelt, and when we consolidated, we started sending 70 to 80. It started as an at-risk program, really to kind of get kids who were at risk for dropout, to give them a flavor and a taste of we want to give you a hands-on education, get you into a pathway. What we do in 8th grade is we actually have a career curriculum where we're introducing some of those options into that, and then we have electives built in the way of technology education that all of our 8th graders take, where they're getting a lot of those experiences in the 4 main domains of manufacturing, our CAD program, computer essentials, and then robotics and engineering.
Do they physically go to the VOTEC at all? Or
We
do
take them for a visit in 8th grade in November. So that way when we're scheduling, we'll start that scheduling process here in January. It's a really competitive process. We have anywhere between 250 and 350 of our incoming 9th graders apply to go to the CTC as 9th graders. But at this point, that pool is narrowed down to about 80.
Let's ask you another real question.
Sure.
What's our junior, what's the black population in our district? Do you have anything on hand?
Right
about
now?
Black population?
About
8%.
8%?
Mhm.
How many black teachers do we have?
One.
How many black administrators do we have?
One that I know of.
Well, I mean, you
Well-
count Mr. West.
Well,
Mr.
I'm
West.
saying,
Yeah.
you know, I think for the junior high and I think for an elementary and junior high, there has to be role models for these kids. And I think that the district this size and this diverse should have more minorities work. I know that it's tough getting a teacher or anyone read their PSBA booklet that the black kids aren't going into teaching, which is unfortunate. But you know, they have to have somebody that they can look up to, a role model.
Right.
And you need it. I think you need it we need a black administrator at high school and junior high, personally, or someone from the community that can relate, to go and sit and go relate to those kids and talk to those kids.
We think, actually,
we do
Mr.
have
Neely, if you
someone,
want to,
yeah.
firsthand, we had, through Blair Family Solutions, our graduation initiative, they are providing us with an employee who, and you want to talk about
Sure.
Felicia? Yeah.
So through Blair Family Solutions, Scott Lambert's been very generous in helping us out. There's a program that we're sort of emulating that began in Tyrone, where they had an employee from BFS come and help with students, mentoring, just following up, talking, making connections. I mean, in fact, they called the program Connecting Like Crazy at Tyrone. So they were generous enough to let us sort of copy what they were doing, and the person that we have working through Blair Family Solutions with our students, her name's Felicia Wright, African-American girl from Philadelphia, and yeah, I see it firsthand. She's able to connect, however you want to say it, because of the background with a lot of students that you may not, you know, just because of their shared experiences.
The thing that I, you know, since I know we won't in the near future have a, you know, influx of black teachers or administrators because they're just not out there. But if you have a black that is well known in the community, you know what I'm saying? Say like, I don't know, maybe a Mr. Witherspoon or someone younger that has gone through the life. You know, we can all sit here. How many blacks are here? You know what? We can all sit here and think, you know, empathize with them, but we don't know what they're going through. We don't know what it is to be, you know, in a minority situation.
Right.
I remember in college I went to the Veterans Club was mostly all black, and I went to a dance that was mostly all black. You know, I know how I felt. Now, can you imagine feeling that way consistently? You know, and I just think that there may be some people in the community, whether we pay them or they come in volunteer, just to go and talk to these kids. I think that it would be something. You know, someone like kid that just got inducted to the Hall of Fame.
Dr. Gates?
No, the basketball player, Curtis Miller. Someone like that could come and talk to them. Yeah, that's all I'm saying. I just think that the district this size, this diverse, we have to have some diversity. That's just my opinion. And on your improvement, your one plan where you go and you talk to parents, you go and talk to parents, where is that?
Under the interventions. It's a little tough to see on there.
Interventions, yeah.
Yes.
could you take, to talk to those parents, you'd have, who you have, Sheriff, that go and talk to the parents?
Sometimes a supervisor and I, sometimes school police will take me and I'll go with them. But I mean, we do go frequently. I mean, we do have meetings, we set up a lot of phone conferences, working with agencies, we have them, and sometimes it's better to have them at like a neutral ground, like if we have it like at their mental health agency, we have it at the county level, we'll have it sometimes there.
And I think we all agree that, you know, parents aren't involved in their kids' education or anything, you know, we might as well throw them out the door. But could you take a parent to these, I mean, a parent, say like a parent like Kelly, you know, I'm just saying, a parent that raises the kid, to teach, actually advise the parent how to raise
Like a
the kid.
mentor.
Because I think that, you know, some parents aren't doing parenting very well, and I think that we can agree on that some aren't.
Mr. Francis, I couldn't tell you how many times we sat in meetings where the parent is very frustrated and simply just says, I don't know what to do. I can't, they won't listen to me, they won't cooperate, you know, they're begging for help. You know, they struggle. They struggle with how to deal with an adolescent who is not compliant or just simply will not cooperate. When they ask them to try to get them out of bed, they try to get them up in the morning, whatever incentive they want to provide them. You know, we hear all the time, I've taken away everything I can take away at this point. There's nothing more I can take away. You know what, and that's part of that say it process. And that's really important to get all the stakeholders at the table. The parents, the counselors, the teachers, the administrator, bring them all there to come up with a plan. What can we do? And the student, you tell us, what can we do to incentivize you to want to attend school and not be apathetic and put forth an effort? You know, what can we do? You know, what would motivate you? You know, and we put together an improvement plan with the kid. If you do X, Y, and Z, you'll earn this privilege or you'll earn this reward, whatever it may be. And some of the time it works and some of the time it doesn't. But you couldn't be more right. One of the things we tossed around, we actually done parent classes. You know, back at the junior high at Roosevelt, I recall, we would have experts come in and talk about what is impactful and what is effective parenting. We gave away TVs to try to attract people to come to those events. We would provide food, snacks, you know, whatever we could do. And it was so, we couldn't get people to come out. Our community engagement activities at that level, at that junior high age level, that's why I think it's so important to get them early.
Right.
And develop those habits at a young age and get that parent involvement. That's one of the other things. You know, the drop off in parent involvement, direct parent involvement, it goes like this. It starts here in elementary school and it slowly starts to decline. You know, we need to bring more of that back where parents are directly involved, not just did you check Skyward, did you check, you know, did you get the notification about grades, whatever it may be. What is their daily involvement in their child's education? You know, and how can they do that?
Well, but you're dealing with even a more touchy issue when you're talking about special needs populations, because we even have degrees of disabilities, and a lot of those disabilities and a lot of those issues are gonna, I'm not gonna say preclude a child from having good attendance, but it's gonna make it much harder. My son has special needs, I know that. I've lived with it my whole life. Fortunately, he loves school. But when you get on a certain task, let's say, what's our population of autism kids right now, do we know? Or do we just lump it all in as special needs?
Between 8-9.5%.
Okay, and you know the autism spectrum, you know how it goes. And when you have certain autistic behaviors, school is not in the cards. And that's what they're holding against us on this, correct? We're looking against
Students
population.
with special disabilities, yes.
So what I'm saying is, and those parents are juggling so many issues with special needs. And honestly, one of the things, and I know how important it is for school, but you've got your work cut out for you, because when you're dealing with those kids, even getting them into the classroom away from certain behaviors to get them there, that's tough. And this is population and the black students that we're dealing with.
And just so you guys understand the numbers, what this is, 24% of our students with disabilities did not have 90% attendance. That's any days, not illegal days.
Right.
They did not have 90% attendance of all days. That includes medically excused days, and that's the new standard with the states. Regular attendance which is defined as 90% of enrolled days in a year. So the game's changed a lot with attendance. It's not just about truancy. It's not just about illegal absences. You could have a kid with 0 illegal absences that is considered not a regular attendant because of, well, they go on a family trip, 5-6 days, approved family trip. They have an illness, they miss 4 or 5 days, because no longer can you lump those in and count them as one absence. Every day counts.
Does that also include kids with disabilities?
Absolutely.
Health issues that can't be there?
Unless, and if they're on a cover letter, they're excused days, but they're still days.
Right.
They're still days, yep.
So they do understand, though, the touchiness of these issues with the population we're talking about.
The thing is, we have to be proactive, and we have to be proactive from kindergarten up. We've put a lot of pieces in place, which we hope are going to make a distinct difference as these kids move through the grades. But once it gets to the point where kids missing 20 days of school, you've almost missed the boat. You've got to be proactive. And parenting, it's one of those things where parenting problems start when the child's in the crib. And so how do we develop that rapport with parents and teach them how to move forward properly? It gets very difficult.
Well, and Dave touched on that. I mean, he's absolutely right. If the parents aren't involved, there's not much hope for that child unless the child is extremely self-motivated.
Right.
Mr. Hoover, we got sent a letter from the junior high school last week, and I contacted the parents because I was so disturbed by it. They received an invitation to attend the student attendance improvement plan meeting. They sent us a letter back saying that they will absolutely not attend that meeting, that there's absolutely nothing wrong with their child, and that they do not want to engage in any type of interaction with the school district, and laid out a number of really interesting reasons why. Now, this is someone who would have received 4 written notifications of attendance issues, been in service on the requirements of providing a doctor's or a parental excuse when your child is absent, did none of that, didn't provide any excuses, sent in a blanket excuse. My child was ill on the following day, so had another issue, and just listed the dates clear back to September. But they would not attend the meeting. And there we still held the meeting. We had the child there. What can we do to help you? Put some things in place. But it's a challenge. It is. There are certain families it is a challenge with, but we got to continue to work on them.
With the attendance rule, and that's done by the state, I suppose.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
And now you could go through your absentees, and you could see what percentage of those were excused. So I'm sure that rate would decrease quite a bit if you put all legal absences in with the.
It would decrease drastically.
And they don't care, right?
Right, that's exactly it. And that's the thing, with the state getting involved in different things. I know they're much educated than I am, but they're not in it like you guys are here every day and understanding what's going on with kids. So, when the state tells you to do something other than pay your bills, they really hinder school districts, I should say.
Yeah, and we're open to a lot, but I think we have a lot of things in place in terms of how we're addressing the attendance concerns, the graduation and dropout rate, as it sits now. And like I said, overall, with a large population, we are meeting and exceeding the standard. It's our subgroups at this point that are being dinged for being slightly below the benchmark.
The subgroups really, like I said, if you take away the legal absence, these kids are most likely to be in compliance.
And the ones that aren't, we're working with directly. I mean,
Sure.
Deeper interventions, tier 2, tier 3 interventions with those folks.
Thank you.
And just real quick, I know, one other thing, just a suggestion. Did you ever think about reaching out to some of these kids who went through this at-risk or this group of kids, and think about having them come back and maybe speak to a group?
That's a great idea. Having kids that were either successful and saw the light or ones that weren't, maybe it was too late, and have them come back and kind of tell their
I
story.
think if they hear directly from somebody who was in that situation, and once again, I'm speaking, my thing is, because of my son and myself, special needs, I think you have to see a light at the end of the tunnel, like you said. Whereas, you're falling behind academically, and you just think, well, it's too hard. Well, someone maybe should come back and speak and say, here's what I did, here's how I got through it, and look where I am today, kind of thing.
Great idea.
So, I have a few things that have just been written.
Sure.
Big down. So I'm gonna go back to the first one, there's a few questions, but, so you had the parenting classes and you said they were poorly attended. So you're trying to find a way to reach out to folks. Can you piggyback off of other events in some way? Like maybe you have a basketball game, at the middle of the basketball game, you have some kind of announcement that whatever parenting event is going to be taking place at the junior high, and just try to engage people that way instead of the standard, here's the note that goes home.
We did do some things where we advertised and piggybacked off an event, for instance, like Meet the Teacher Night, because we know Meet the Teacher Night is extremely well attended, as well as parent-teacher conferences in the fall, and we held events before or after those, and they were also very poorly attended, unfortunately. So we did try, thinking when we had a captive audience, that we would do something like that, so we have attempted that as well.
Well, what was the span between Meet the Teacher Night and whatever event you had?
It was either right before or right after the
So
event.
it was
Same day.
around that.
Same day, yes,
Okay.
the same day of it,
One
it was
drive.
just held before or after it.
So,
We've also gone to, to Logan, and Fairview,
Logan.
we've gone up to Logan Hills and Fairviews where the parents were. We promoted it to try to engage there, thinking that maybe they didn't have transportation.
right.
We took counselors in, we took principals in blue jeans and t-shirts so that we weren't offensive.
Via the Gloria Gates Foundation.
Yes, we did. We worked very closely with them for years, and we couldn't get anyone to attend. They would bring their children and let us interact with their children, but parents would not stay and engage with us at all.
Well, that's
How many
Brad
times did we do
basically-
that?
Mr. Hatch basically brought up trying to give away TVs to entice people to come.
Yeah. Oh,
I've
absolutely.
been in coordination or attempts to coordinate with county social services at Jim Hudak or anybody at Blair County or.
We work with a lot of local agencies, and we have representation on the countywide, those initiatives. The biggest one was, help me out, it's with,
Well, are you
Blair
doing-
County
Well, we're talking.
Healthy Coalition.
And then also, like, the county is actually providing funding through children and youth where we're utilizing Evolutions.
Evolutions.
Where they can actually go into the homes with parents. And like, we all sit here and talk about, like, we have tons of parent trainings. But the parents that we need to reach is about building that type of trust and understanding. You know, we want them to help their children buy into the importance of school and becoming productive citizens. And some parents, they may have lost trust before, or they have difficulty in school. When you do go into their homes, they are much more receptive. I know that from my standpoint, because sometimes people are intimidated in coming in when we have presentations and those types of things. My parent advisory, they have talked to me about that. So that's why the supervisors and I went to a couple of homes this morning, and they're at ease in talking to you and trying to figure things out. Evolutions, they're excellent. Children and youth actually fund them, and then when kids get 6 unexcused absences, then we either do a children and youth referral or we do an Evolutions referral. And as long as Evolutions can take the students, then they work collaboratively with the families. Like, they actually send counselors in to pick the students up, bring them to school, they work with the county, and that's important to make those connections with the families. But the families have to accept that type of assistance too, that they welcome people into the homes. I think that's the biggest thing for the families.
And what you're saying isn't even just a school issue, it's a community issue. There's a lot of people who don't realize how education kind of forms this cornerstone with, you know, your economy in the area. So, like, it's not just parents.
And I know as we build this plan, I know something that myself as a parent and an administrator and being a part of Altoona Area School District, something that I hope and we've talked about, like something we want to work on with students or making better connections, which we're working on it. but actually having students being mentored, like when they're transitioning, connect them with somebody that has the same interest, that they can build that trust with, because it is difficult, especially for students that are going through puberty. They might have mental health issues, they don't have a lot of support at home. It's a matter of making connections, so they want to be here, and I think that's important.
And it's not just Altoona, there's a lot of other.
Oh, I know, I left here as a rural district, I know.
So, and what's nice about these conferences you guys go on, that you can talk to other people in your situation, and brainstorm some things and see what they're doing.
network.
And that's why these conferences are so important for you guys to go to.
Thanks.
Sherry talked about the clinical homes model that we have at the junior high school, and that's a group that goes into the homes and works with families, not just with the students, but also with the parents. And, they're limited because it's an intense work, that they have to put in with families. So they're limited on the number of families they can take on. And we have a meeting coming up in January that we're asking for more counselors in order to help us with this, because we know we have more students that we can expand that need this amount of support. So we're hopeful that we can get additional support that way as well.
And this jumps back to what David mentioned. Whenever you go in and you meet, like you go and interact at their homes and everything, you can take a parent, but you might also benefit from taking a minority figure with you. I mean, I know like we have our basketball coach, we have a security, a police officer in here, so that might benefit you. But my one last thing was I know we have different clubs and such. Like, how many minority-based clubs do we have? What's their participation? And do they sponsor events to encourage more of that group to come in? Like, I know at PIP we had the Black Action Society, and those guys would have events, and everybody could come, but it was sponsored by a group that people could kind of connect to if they felt like they're.
We have a diversity club at both levels that has been in existence for years now, where they do 4 Saturday trainings with a whole bunch of other school districts, and it's made up of a culturally diverse group of students at each level, and it culminates with a trip to Washington, D.C., where they go to the Holocaust Museum and they learn about diversity, nation's origins, all of those things, but they do activities that are targeted towards multiculturalism and being more accepting and being more open at each of those 4 Saturday trainings, and those are facilitated by staff. And we typically are maxed in the number of kids that we have available for those groups, and they've already started. I think they've already done at least 1 Saturday training, and I think possibly 2. But they do a tour of the local churches. They go to Penn State, do some simulations about students with disabilities and wheelchairs, and really gaining that sensitivity training for understanding, what challenges exist to certain students. So,
well, the 2 things that jump out on that are, I mean, obviously you're maxed, and if you're maxed, you can't include everybody who might want to participate. And the other thing is if you only have these Saturday trainings, whereas like if it was a club or group that meets every month or something like that, then maybe people wander in and out. They might attend this month, they might not, but it's a group that they're connecting with.
sure.
Just real quick too, back to what Dave was saying about having a visible symbol. I mean, this wasn't my intent, but I have had so many people in wheelchairs and with disabilities talk to me and say to me about being on the school board and being visible out there. And I don't want to go out, and whenever you started going out there and being at these public events and showing people that I feel more comfortable going out and doing things. Because there was a time I thought I'd be shunned. So it's having visible examples, and then people say, I mean, one of my good friends, I'll put her name out there, Tammy Basic, says, hey, you're representing me. So if you go in there and you can't get in a bathroom because it's not handicap accessible, you drive through the wall. So that's a good thing to have a visible, and Dave's right. I mean, our minority, now I don't know what our minority population is, population of Altoona, I don't know what it is. But once again, It's just visible, someone in your position, able to look at them and say, well, look, even a jackass like Rick can do this, so maybe I can do it. I mean, a person like Rick.
Well, thank you all for your, and we will update you throughout the process, let you know where we stand, and when we have a draft of our improvement plan, we'll be sure to get that to you to review. And think about if you would like to possibly be a part of that process. You know, like I said, we would love to have a board member as part of that process. Thank you very much.
Brad, I've got one thing.
Yes, sir.
You know, I like when you touched on the CTCO there about getting the ninth grade involved. You know, I've been saying that for 7 years. Let's get the ninth grade over. And I was over last month talking to the new principal over there, Mike. And I said, some kids are getting bored. I'd like to see a culmination, say perhaps if it's doable, 9th and 10th grade in like electricity, 11th and 12th into electronics, plumbing, carpentry, throw some masonry in there.
They are open to kind of rethinking their 3-year program process and
As we
looking
speak,
at how we
yes.
can get kids into different pathways, maybe multiple pathways, where they can be completers in designated programs and have some diversity in what, you know, give them that exposure. What I like about the 9th grade option is that if you can give them a flavor of a little bit of everything, because right now they're doing it, a lot of the kids are getting pushed into programs that they don't necessarily, they weren't their first, second, or third choice. It's what's left because they're 9th graders.
Yeah.
So what we want to do is try to look at designing a program that gives them exposure to all of the different pathways that they could look at, you know, general areas like your construction, maybe your outdoor, like power equipment, engine, small engine, whatever it may be, but give them a piece of each of that. That way they've really experienced it and know this is what I really want to do for the next 3 years, so that that last semester of their year, they're out working in the field, you know, earning money, earning credit, whatever it may be, but having to be out completers sooner so that they're ready to go out and jump right into the workforce. Because I know those jobs are available. I mean, I talked to a couple of masons that, hey, I'll come in and hire 2-3 masons every year, and I can't get them. You know, so those are the, I mean, we want to turn out those kids and have high-paying, family sustainable wages, you know, for the second they walk out of school.
That's right. Thank you.
Yep.
To answer Rick's question, as of the 2010 census, it's 6.2% that are not white in Altoona.
And that includes everything.
Yeah, that's Hispanic, black.
So we don't have the breakdown. We're worried about the black population, but we don't have the breakdown, correct?
Well, breakdown, or black is here, that's 3.3 out of that 6.2. So half of your minority demographic.
Asian.
Yeah, that's the,
Right.
A very, very small Hispanic population, when I would be demographic, if at all. Like,
Thank you.
well, Hispanic was, according to this, was 1.3. Now, once you get into Native Americans, 0.1, and Asians, 0.4.
So Hispanic is bigger than I thought. Okay.
Yeah. But still, I mean, better than nothing.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, Commissioners. Mike Arnold with Cliff Reynolds and Gary Marshall's here with me as well. To give a brief update on the high school project as we've been doing the last few months. Just following the typical agenda, we'll give a little bit of an executive summary, talk about the progress, financials, some issues and considerations we're working on, quick update on student education, and then some photographs. I think one thing you've noticed over the past month or so is a lot of the work that was being done on the additions was underground and you really wasn't as visible. And as of today, we have steel that is being erected on site. So the passerby is now seeing the fruits of all this labor, and there is a tremendous amount of work going on your project at this point. We continue to hope for good weather. We've battled a little bit here for the first. We're now into our 7th month. But the hope is that things will start to settle down with precipitation and we can get into a good rhythm. Because it is important that we continue to be able to get the structure up out of the ground while the weather is still favorable and we move through. As I've done before, just kind of like to give a recap of the milestones. And it's the various colors indicate the status of it, obviously, until we turn over the partial board locker room, restrooms, and infrastructure. The field house addition is under construction. The balance of the boys' locker room has been turned over. The addition to the field house is running a bit behind because of unforeseen conditions, weather, and the like. It is not doesn't affect the critical path. In other words, the overall completion of the project, fortunately. And we're reviewing the schedule now to see how we can make up some of that time. So That's where we stand there. We continue to work in the various classrooms. As you recall, we're kind of in a process where we take 4 classrooms at a time, renovate those, turn those over so that we keep, we're disrupting a minimum amount of space as we can. The new high school building, tracking basically on schedule, maybe a little bit behind, but it's such a long runway that there's going to be opportunities to make up that time. Of course, the demo of the existing high school is down the road. So a lot of moving parts right now. We're in a lot of areas. Very, very complicated project, and we're navigating our way through. Some of the, as far as the progress is concerned, the addition at the field house, the footings and the foundations are basically complete for that addition. We continue with the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing underground. Steel, as mentioned, began being erected as of today. Continue to backfill slab on grade, and the prep is continuing. Canopy work is underway, and of course we continue to work with the electrical conduit installation as we prepare for the new Penelec feed. At the high school, you can see again the towers, the stair towers are up, and as far as the masonry are up to the top out of that area. Continue with our underground piers and footings. We're making our way around so that the foundations, the footings are going to be complete shortly, which is a good sign because of some of the unsuitable soils. We'll no longer have to talk about those, which I'm sure everyone's excited about. And then, we are looking at the steam vaults. We'll touch on that a little bit in a moment as far as the demo of that, kind of highlight that as a change that we've been discussing. And then in the field house, the new boilers were put into service towards the end of November. Again, we continue to turn over the 4 renovated classrooms at a time.
Can I ask a quick question? Because I just hear stuff on the streets. You guys haven't had to do any major amount of the foundations or anything, right? Like there's no redoing the foundations.
No.
Okay. Because I just wanted to make sure there's somebody out there talking about that we had to redo foundations, and I never heard anything about that.
Yeah, it's just the unsuitable soils has been the thing.
You had to redo that one pier that the dump truck renewed.
Right. There was one pier that was tore out because it was destroyed by an air engineer.
Yeah.
That would be the only footer that I know that you had to redo.
That happens on occasion when there's a bad survey, layout of anchor bolts and grade beams and all that, and that does happen on projects. It's not the case here.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. Thanks.
As far as the hard cost construction summary, always like to give you an idea where we stand with pay to date. There's been a little over $14 million in billings that have been processed on the project of the $74 million total hard construction cost. Change order contingency, we started with an amount of $2,300,000. We're at $1,007,000. That is of what's been approved, what's been reviewed by the facilities committee, and what has been approved today. We're obviously evaluating other changes. And did want to highlight one change that was approved, I believe it was at the December 3rd meeting. It was based on estimates. We now have final costs in. It's slightly higher than that, I think $460 higher than what was approved. But did want to highlight a bit about this change. And this is the steam vault that is within the footprint of the new building. And this has to be demolished, and because of the lines that are underneath it, the way that it has to be demolished, the way that it has to be removed from the site is relatively delicate and time consuming. So there was, a large portion of that was a labor cost, and here Adam, if you look at it, is talking about this. There's actually 2 of them. We've got 3 pictures, but 2 of the same vault. So.
Both of the vaults contain active steam lines with 280-degree steam.
It's over 200 degrees steam, yeah.
Okay. So when we saw cut that, it's not just a matter of busting the concrete up. It has to be rigged, lifted off in sections, and then it has to be pounded, broken up. There are at least 4 loads that need to go to improved landfill. So you have an excavator with an operator. We're looking at least 1 day per vault, so there's 2 days work there involved. To break that up, to get it off there, break it up, load it, haul it off. The hydro hammer, you're going to have days worth of just hammering, breaking concrete up enough that it can be loaded.
And all the while, we have to protect the steam lines that are active. So it's not just a matter of picking the stuff up, putting the truck in the truck. And I don't know, maybe the description that went out on that was a little bare on details, but there's a little bit more work to it. And the number that was presented on the 12-3 school board was part of that was estimated. And we thought we were estimated a little bit high. Now we're just a little bit short. So there's $641 difference between what was approved and what these two total now.
As far as the soft costs are concerned, we're tracking pretty close to budget. There's been some, items that have been in excess of what was in the budget, and some savings that we captured, which we reported before. Obviously, that's kind of a fluid piece, especially when you have large items that are still in the process of being bought. We did finish up the evaluation of the commissioning piece, the HVAC commissioning, and HF Lens is within the budget, and that will be awarded shortly. The two major ones that are still out there, which are being discussed currently, the furniture piece as well as technology. And under the technology, we're in the discussions about what the requirements are and how that matches up against what's in the prime contracts and what's not, so that we can have a technology scope that it completes the work that needs to be done. Regarding considerations, we continue to deal with unforeseen conditions as of course, as we're getting out of the ground. Existing conditions above ceilings, although that hasn't been a big issue as of late. The unsuitable soils, as I mentioned before, we're kind of getting away from that, fortunately. Overall schedule, just really keep an eye on this. There's obviously a tremendous number of activities that we track. We talk about this at all the job conferences. We update that schedule on a monthly basis. And we're trying to analyze it, working with contractors to see where there might be float, where we can capture, make up some time. And it's all part of the give and take, discussion that occurs. So we're managing all of that. We're always mindful of the weather. We want to make sure that, it's an easy excuse, and it's our job to evaluate and dig in a little bit to see if, okay, it did rain today, but how did that impact your schedule? And were you able to work around it? So those are the kind of things that we're always looking at, when we're evaluating the schedule and making sure we're reporting properly. And then, of course, the utility companies and the work that they're doing, people's gas and that like. So those are some of the areas that we're concentrating on, focusing on right now. As far as student education is concerned, we had our first session. We reported on that the last time. We're looking at a second session in February. I'll be talking with Mr. Neely to pick a date here shortly. What we're going to focus on, as you can see, the steel starting to be erected. I think by the time we get to February, there'll be a more robust level of steel that's out there for the students to see, with connections, with the bolting and everything else, and of course the concrete masonry units will be progressing as well. So we're going to focus on that as far as the piece that is associated with the project. We actually have a mason foreman who has a son that's within the Altoona School District. So we may have him come in and do some demonstrations with the kids. Then we're going to ask the architect to speak about the profession of architecture, to give the students a little bit of background on that. The last one, we talked a little bit more about construction management. Again, kind of towards the discussion that preceded ours, how to engage the kids in some of these professions that are very valuable. And then, of course, a building tour. We'll include the high school students and the VOTEC students, and we'll try to get as big of a turnout as we can, and just continue to work that through the project. Some of the progress photos. Gary, I'll let you run with this.
Basically, the first photo replacing the return air units up on the road in the A building, and then on the right hand side you can see the forms. That's a lot of formwork that had to go in to span the electrical vault that we talked about forever, and turned into an expensive fix. There's a little more of the formwork. We got that board stripped, and we got the stone backfilled inside. And over the next 2 to 3 weeks, we prep the slab on grade and get that board so we can take our walls on that. There's an overhead view. You can see the stone going in the backfill.
Large chunk of the backfill.
I'm sorry?
A large chunk of the backfill.
Yes.
We're getting photos from certain angles, so every month we're giving you an idea of what it looks like from month to month, and the
if you look across the roof there, you're gonna see that's the line, the yellow line, that's the gas line. You can see where it comes across the entire building. That's coming up from the new gas meter and gas hookup on the other side of the building.
13th Street.
Okay.
Okay, that's the A building addition from today, starting to set the steel. Starting with the canopy, working from the east side of that back towards the addition to the west. Our intent right now is to mobilize the cranes on the new B building site the week between Christmas and New Year's. So hopefully January 2nd, we can start getting people in the new B building is our target date right now. We have 2 of the stair towers completed. They're starting a third, and they'll be working along the junction with the third stair tower. They'll be starting one of the elevator shafts. And then that's the inside of the lobby where they're replacing their glass bed area is due in the 27th. And so we'll start getting that closed back up again. There's your new heat boilers in the boiler room. Ductwork for classrooms, which is now actually in the ceiling, that's what it's supposed to be. We're going to be turning those 4 classrooms over between Christmas and New Year's, and then moving on to the next phase. There's some of the casework in your new classrooms in progress.
Yeah, and, you know, one final note, we always talk, we always open up our meetings talking about safety, even whenever we're, you know, any type of meeting that we have, we make that the first topic of discussion. And so far so good, no incidents, no accidents. Haven't had any OSHA visits yet, but I'm sure that they'll be around. It's a large project, and I'm sure if we can, you know, we'll welcome them there. I think JC Worth's doing a nice job as the lead safety contractor and making sure that all the workers are safe. Any questions?
Now, what's the floor here? Is it wood?
Yeah, that's existing floor to remain. It's final composition tile. We put ram board down on it to protect it.
Yeah.
So as we're walking across it, we're
So you're gonna tile floor, then finished product.
Yeah.
Now, how about the new school? What kind of floor is gonna be in there?
It's all over. Not after back to finish it.
Some pieces are terrazzo,
Yeah.
a large chunk of it is VCT, the vinyl composite top.
Yeah, the majority of it, I would say.
Majority is VCT. Some places will be carpeted depending if they need sound treatment.
Okay. I'm still trying to get footage to the ground. I'm not looking at footage too much right now. Baby steps.
You know, way back a year ago, they were talking about cement. And, you know, cement in the classroom, you know, it's like, cement, you stand on cement all day, it just takes it out of you.
Yeah.
They were talking about that quartz composite tile, which is a hard tile. It was always going to be either VCT or some form of tile. Is that your last set of pictures?
It is.
Okay. I'll tell you, if you could back it up just a touch. Let's back it up to that where they filled in the foundation. The watching how they did this and how quickly they processed it. You know, he showed you the forms and how they formed it up. This whole chunk of the project was very much setting the pace for the steel. And in a week, once the sides were cured enough, they basically were working 3-4 days straight, just setting up all of the conduits, all the wiring, all the plumbing, all the gas lines, getting all those vents in. Underneath that's just a honeycomb of all the mechanicals. And then the gentleman, 8 hours a day straight, just running that little Bobcat, and there was another one in there just backfilling and getting it up to grade so to be ready to finish up. I think Reynolds is in there finishing some of the drainage pipes and that kind of thing right now,
Yes.
and they're hopefully going to be prepared to do slab on grade first week of January or next week? First week of January.
Be 2 to 3 weeks.
All right, so they're moving along very briskly. The pictures they had of the ironwork, they actually have that entire beam across the front, and they have the entire beam across the front. It's up. That longer beam, that's where the cantilever for the second floor of the classrooms is. That's how it juts out. They've started to run the beams across the centers of that big where you see the plywood opening.
Yeah.
So they,
Right across here. Yeah, that's already here.
and so they've got 2 of the sections done. When I last checked, it was about an hour and a half, 2 hours ago. It's amazing how efficient they are in moving this thing along. And I gotta say, for the number of primes that were involved in that area, that pit last week, the week before, to get it ready was amazing.
Yeah,
How
the big
smooth that was.
pieces go fast. Once we get the big pieces set, we'll go ahead and mobilize the cranes over across the street, then they'll have 2 or 3 weeks of just detailing the interior pieces, going from this one to that one, smaller pieces, the welds, the bolt tightening, torquing, so on and so forth. So, but we're hoping to be out of there within a week and a half as far as the big pieces.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
So the teachers have some peace and quiet in a few months coming.
Over Christmas break, they'll have some peace and
Because the kids are like, we can't hear you, because all the beeping and the banging and the.
Well, that.
Nobody knew they were there. Yeah, they were shown on the plans.
Oh, they were?
Yes, and they were indicated on the plans to be infilled with concrete, which we will do once they're, well, in fact, we're gonna do that, Wednesday.
I thought there were some bolts that you guys didn't know were there, but it's not those ones.
Not those. These
Okay.
are the active steam lines we knew was there. Nobody knew that the top of them was gonna be up above the finished floor. So it wasn't a matter of just filling in like this for the base contract. We had to actually cut the sides down, get it down low enough.
So why would the engineers or the architects know the height compared to where it's gonna be?
Can't answer that.
So there, to me, that falls back on them. If we should be paying this bill, they should.
That would be a valid question.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else?
Thanks. Thanks, Mike.
It seems like we just did this, and here we are again. So for the 1920, talk about 1920 budget. To start it, you have to review where we were in 17-18, what we're projecting for this current year, and for board policy, what student enrollment, what the index is. We're going to talk about the eligible referendum exceptions and estimated tax increases. So our PDE has student enrollment projected out for next year for 1920 of 7,523 students, and our 12-1 enrollment for this year was 7,519, so it's still pretty close. The PDE Act 1 index came out, and for next year it's 3.4%. This current year it was 3.5%. So in 17-18, the audit report, I just got the draft today. We were ending up with $1.1 million use of fund balance out of the general fund, and we used the rest of the debt service fund, and the combined use of fund balance is $3.3 million. From our original budget to the ending deficit, it was $6.3 million, mostly from under budgeted revenues. We did not budget so conservatively in 18-19. We tried to get everything as close as possible so we would avoid these large fluctuations. On a $100 million budget, to be as close as 1.4 million on expenditures, we really managed to, I think, budget well and then maintain the budget. We had contingencies built in, but we've been, since Dr. Prietel has been here, we've been trying to narrow things down and put together as realistic a budget as possible without overinflating it. The best I can tell right now with our 18-19, which I say this every time, and there's still nothing changed with this. You're self-insured, and you have people's health involved. Just a couple of large health concerns can hit that stop loss, which is $250,000. There's a $300,000, but once we meet the first one, it's $250,000. You get 3 or 4 people with major health issues. 4, we've had $1 million. And in the past couple of years, we've only had 1. We've had 2 on the plan, but only 1 of our employees. But we already know that we have a couple of other issues this year. So this is a rough estimate for the end of the year. We budget, as I said, we budgeted our revenues much more closely this year. The expenditures are much closer as well, and with those stop losses hitting, it's going to be tight. So at this point, projecting, and this includes our debt service as well, projecting a possible $4 million use of fund balance at the end of 18-19. But I'll keep you up to date on that as we go through the process every month. For 19-20, the potential tax increase would be on the 3.4 going to the index would, if you chose to increase taxes to the index, would generate about $622,000. The past 2 years, you may remember, we have been eligible for and applied for and were approved for referendum exceptions for special ed and retirement. Sherry has always been so careful with providing services to our students, but at the best cost. And she's always watching the costs, and she has actually kept the special ed expenditures, she and the team and everyone together, so much so that there's not enough of an increase in special ed expenditures from last year to this year to allow us to be eligible to apply for exceptions. So we're not eligible. The way I look at it is she has basically reset the baseline for us for next year as salaries and benefits will continue to increase. We may be eligible next year, but for this year we are not. And the retirement contribution has started to level off as well. You may remember it went from 25 to 30 to 31, 32. Well, they compare it from year to year. You're eligible for exceptions based on increases over not only the prior year, but some baseline years that you threw in for retirement, which complicates things. But the good news is in 18-19, our retirement contribution rate is 33.43. The pension system has exceeded their earnings in the last 2 years, and rather than they were projecting for 19-20 to be at 35%, and it's going to be it was going to be 34.79. It's going to be 34.29, and then for the following year, it's moved down from 35% to 34.7%. So it's leveling out, but the moral of that story is there's not enough of an increase to allow us to be eligible for the retirement exceptions. So going to the index is the best we can do if we're looking to increase revenues from local taxes. So raising taxes to the index again would add $622,000 to the budget, and for every $100,000 of assessed value, it would be $20.40 a year, or $1.70 a month. And this is similar to what we presented last year. And that increase would be to meet our operational expenditures and help repay the debt. And so in January, we'll be presenting a resolution that will be not to exceed the index, because there are no referendum exceptions that are allowable. And this actually is a normal budget process, and we will dispense with the more complicated, expensive, and accelerated Act 1 budget requirements, because we would have to have a preliminary budget approved this puts us on the normal path. We will have a preliminary budget for you to review prior to approving the resolution not to exceed the index, just so you can have an idea of where we think we will be for next year, but it will be a whole process. In January, we'll be meeting with all the principals and the department heads again to have their actual numbers. I'll have a rough estimate for you because our meeting's January 7th, but in the next couple of weeks, we'll put that together, a rough estimate, and then we'll fine tune it after we meet with every department and get it closer and give you updates as we go for a final budget approval in May, the preliminary, and then the final budget approval for June. So it's opting out resolution that we won't raise taxes above the Act 1 index for January, and that will put us on the slower track. Questions?
I have one, said about the healthcare. I know we have teachers with children born with disabilities. It is what it is. It's a shame, but we got to deal with it.
It's sad. We do have good health care coverage.
Yes. This is nice. It could be better, but it's nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, that's what we had for this evening. Bringing up today is to how we're moving forward, keeping everything operating and running as well as we possibly can. I want to thank Brad and Sherry. I want to thank Camilla, Susan, for a lot of work into developing today's presentation. Obviously, we're relieved that we're in a situation from a special ed standpoint we're no longer eligible for exceptions, because that means we've got a really strong control of the special ed budget, and that's been a couple of years in coming. So, thank you, Sherry. Congratulations. I'd like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Tomorrow, lunchtime, we're having a luncheon here, and the board members like to attend. It's the Christmas lunch for administration in the central office. What does it start? It's 11:30 or 11 o'clock? 11.
They have to wear an ugly sweater though.
Oh, yeah, there is an ugly sweater contest.
Oh, I don't think there's anyone here who wears green bars. All right, Sharon. Oh, not here. Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.